There is one gospel on which I stand for all eternity. It is my story, my Father's plan. The Son has rescued me. Oh, what a gospel, oh, what a peace, my highest joy and my deepest need. Now and forever he is my light. I stand in the gospel of Jesus Christ. There is one gospel to which I cling, all else I count as loss. For there where justice and mercy meet, he saved me on the cross. No more I boast in what I can bring, no more I carry the weight of sin. For he has brought me from death to life. I stand in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I stand in the gospel of Jesus Christ. There is one gospel where hope is found. The empty tomb still speaks. For death could not keep my Savior down. He lives and I am free. Now on my Savior I fix mine eyes. My life is his and his hope is mine. For he has promised I too will rise. I stand in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I stand in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Let's take our Bibles over to Judges chapter 12. Normally I preach from the iPad, and it had 1% on it, and my font has gotten so big on my iPad trying to read it that I just hit print. So it looks like I brought a book up here tonight. 18 pages when you have size 18 font. It's like the trick the kids use at school, trying to make it look like they wrote more than what they've been doing. You know, somebody asked me, I posted this week that I had started back at some college courses, and they said, now, is the material from the college course going to coincide with sermon series so you can double up on a few things? Well, the main class I'm working through right now is a class on church and church tax laws and nonprofits. So for your sake, it will not work into the sermon. It is a boring class, I'll just say that. But Brian was like, I want your textbook when you're done. He finds that stuff interesting. I don't know what's wrong with him. No, I'm just kidding. But Judges chapter 12 is where we're at. We've been going through a chapter a week here in the book of Judges. And last week, we ended up at the end of chapter 11 talking about Jephthah. And that's kind of where we're at tonight. The book of Judges, I've said this many times, kind of a tragic book, a book that shows us what happens when God's people forget God, when they begin to drift from truth and start doing what's right in their own eyes. And so a lot of stuff that you read in Judges, as we said last week, it's more descriptive than it is prescriptive. It is not something that the Lord is telling us, hey, this is a good idea. He's showing us what happens when we do things that we think are a good idea, and when we do it away from the will of God. By the time we get to Judges chapter 12, they're in spiritual decline. There's some victories, but there's confusion. There's judges, but there's not much spiritual leadership. There's battles that they've won externally, but internally, just a lot of rot going on in the nation. And one of the most dangerous things that can happen is, as far as what happens to the people of God, is not always an attack from the outside. Sometimes the greatest dangers come from within, and that's what's happened here. I believe the devil loves division. He loves to turn God's people against God's people. He loves pride in us. He loves hurt feelings. He loves misunderstanding. He loves offenses. He loves bitterness, and he loves Christians attacking other Christians. And I believe there are churches tonight that could survive persecution, but the gossip destroys them. There are marriages that survive financial hardship, but they collapse because of pride. Entire ministries that can survive all the outward opposition, but they die because brother turns against brother. And Judges chapter 12 is a chapter about a civil war among God's people. And so let's start here in chapter 12, verse number 1. It says, "The men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward and said to Jephthah, Wherefore passest thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and didst not call us to go with thee? We'll burn thine house upon thee with fire." It's quite a strong opening statement here. Verse 2, it says, "And Jephthah said unto them, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon, and when I called you, ye delivered me not out of their hands. And when I saw that ye delivered me not, I put my life in my hands and passed over against the children of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them into my hand. Wherefore then are ye come up unto me this day to fight against me?" Then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim, because they said, Ye Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. And the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites. And it was so that when those Ephraimites which were escaped said, Let me go over, that the men of Gilead said to them, Art thou from an Ephraimite? And he said, Nay. Then said they unto him, Say Shibboleth. And he said, Sibboleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. Then they took him and slew him at the passage of Jordan, and there fell at that time of Ephraimites 40 and 2,000. And Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then died Jephthah the Gileadite, and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. And after him, Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel, and he had 30 sons and 30 daughters, whom he sent abroad, and took in 30 daughters from abroad for his sons, and he judged Israel 7 years. And then died Ibzan, and he was buried in Bethlehem. And after him, Elon, a Zebulunite, judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. And Elon, the Zebulunite, died and was buried in Ajalon, in the country of Zebulun. And after him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Parathonite, judged Israel, and he had 40 sons and 30 nephews that rode on 70 ass colts, and he judged Israel 8 years. And Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Parathonite, died and was buried in Parathon in the land of Ephraim, in the mount of the Amalekites. And so we start off here with this strong statement. Israel had just won this battle against the Ammonites, and instead of everybody in Israel rejoicing, the tribe of Ephraim is threatening Jephthah right here in verse number 1. And from there, really down through those first 7 verses, we're just seeing chaos. And this is really what happens when God's people start fighting against each other. And the tribe of Ephraim comes to Jephthah. He is angry. They are coming in angry and offended. And if you notice what they said, why did you go over there and fight against them and you didn't call us? So what we see was their issue wasn't that they thought you're leading wrong, you shouldn't be in this battle, we shouldn't be doing these things. It wasn't a doctrinal issue, it wasn't a moral issue, a righteousness issue. This was a pride issue. You did something without us. Their pride was wounded. Now, Ephraim had a history of this. If you remember, when Gideon went into battle, the tribe of Ephraim came to him the same way. They didn't help. When the call was given for everybody to help, they didn't help. And in Judges chapter 8, they came and confronted Gideon in the same way. There are some people like that. They never want to help, but then they get mad when they're not asked to help. Or even when they are asked to help, they get mad when it works without them, and then they want the credit for those things. They constantly, the tribe of Ephraim wanted recognition and prominence and attention. And so now they're offended, so they say to him, hey, we're going to burn your house down upon thee. They say, you didn't do it the way we think you should do it, so we're going to burn your house down. I mean, if there was ever a verse that escalated really quickly from celebrating a victory in Israel to we're mad, we're going to burn your house down, the one who delivered the nation of Israel. Why? Well, pride always escalates things. We all know, we've heard the verse many times, Proverbs 13:10, that only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom. We all know that verse. But isn't it easy to know that verse and sometimes recognize pride in others, but sometimes not always catch it in ourselves until we're kind of in a situation that we've gotten ourselves into? And notice the Bible doesn't say sometimes contention comes by pride. He says only by pride cometh contention. I believe every church split, every bitter feud, every family war, every ministry that explodes on itself, at the root, there's somewhere's pride. Now, that doesn't mean you don't stand up against things. Maybe there's somebody else exhibiting some pride and you say, hey, we need to do this the right way. And sometimes the battle has to happen. But at the root of that, there's pride. Sometimes it's, well, why didn't they ask me? Or why did so-and-so recognize somebody, but they didn't recognize me? And why didn't I get that position to be a leader? And why don't I feel appreciated? Why didn't they listen to me and then instead they listened to them? I believe pride is deadly. And people absolutely can be hurt unfairly, and people can be mistreated and ignored, and that does happen, but there's a difference between genuine hurt and having to go to somebody to confront them and it just being an ego-driven thing. So not every confrontation is because the person doing the confronting is prideful. Sometimes there's legitimate things that need to be handled. But there's a big difference between that and one who is just offended because they didn't get their way. And we have to be careful not to fall into that trap. And that's what's happening here. Ephraim wasn't burdened for God's glory. He wasn't saying, God needed to be magnified. Ephraim or Jephthah, quit taking credit. They weren't coming to anything like that. They were saying, where were we at? Why didn't we get to do this? They weren't upset about God's glory. They were upset because they didn't get to be the center stage. And sometimes it's difficult to learn to serve God without needing applause or not doing it when no one notices or rejoicing when somebody else gets to be used by the Lord. John the Baptist said, he must increase, but I must decrease. And man, we love that verse. We put that verse on T-shirts. We put it on little bookmarks that we put in things. I've seen it on notebook covers. We put it there. But it's so difficult not to say, but I want to increase some. Lord, I want the Lord to increase, but I want to increase as well. And our pride starts to get in there. And that's the attitude that he must increase and I must decrease. That's the attitude that we see missing here in Judges chapter 12. And we see Jephthah's response in verse number 2. It said, he said to them, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon, and when I called you, ye delivered me not out of their hand. So he said, I did call you, and you did nothing. He said, I did call you. He said, and when I saw that ye delivered me not, verse 3, I put my life in my hands and passed over against the children of Ammon. In other words, you wouldn't help me when the battle was going on, so I had to just go do it myself, and now you're wanting all the credit after the victory. And that still happens today. Some people disappear during the work, and they show up when the blessings come in from the work. They vanish during sacrifice. They vanish during hardships. They vanish during labor. Brother Derek has joked about one of his sons. He said he's teased him before about being the blister that shows up after the work is done. Sometimes that's just coincidental. They just happen to show up, and it's like right at time as things are finishing up. But some people have a knack for that on purpose. They notice things are winding down, and they come in there and they're like, "Oh, here, let me get that for you." We were doing a thing today at school. They were moving one of those portable basketball goals, and they had it kind of tilted over on the side, and they're leaning it. And and I won't say his name since we're live stream. There was a kid who's not near as tall as some of the other kids, and one of our taller kids had it, and he was kind of rolling. The other kid is just underneath it, just doing fingertips, not even touching it. But he's like, I'll help, Brother Will, I'll help. And he's just kind of walking along. And he found out there was a big difference when it broke and it fell right into his hands. A big difference from being under it and then actually helping. But, there's a lot of people like that in life. Now, he was kind of doing it to be humorous, but unfortunately, there's a lot of people that kind of live their life that way. I'll try to look like I'm working. I want the recognition I want the blessings from the work. But when God blesses something, suddenly they want ownership. They want to be a part of that then. They don't want to be a part of the sacrifice. And then in verses 4 through 6, we start getting some fighting going on. The situation explodes. Verse 4 says, Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. Think about that. These are not pagans fighting Israel. This is Israel fighting Israel. Brother against brother. The people who had the same covenant from God, they had the same God they were worshiping, the same nation, and now they're killing each other. And man, the devil loves that when God's people do that, because he doesn't even have to do the work himself. He can just sit back and watch us do that work. I've often said, when somebody will come to me about saying, look, the job of the accuser of the brethren is already taken. God's not taking applications for any of us to fill that. There's a difference between trying to lovingly confront and exhort one another and hold accountable versus just attacking one another. And sometimes believers can be more vicious with each other than they are the world. Why? Because we expect more of them. You say you're a believer. You ought to be doing these things. And we are just way more vicious with them. I was talking to a pastor a while back, and man, there's sometimes with pastors that I would look at them and I can, because they're a pastor of an independent fundamental Baptist church, when they do something that I think, that's weird that they would do that. That doesn't, and we'll throw out that term sometimes. Man, that guy, he's getting pretty liberal. And there are some things that I think, man, they definitely are going in a different direction. But most of the world's still going to look at them as an extreme right-wing conservative guy. They're still looked at as the crazy people in the world. But when they're one of our own, we can kind of critique them a little bit more. We tend to do that. Same thing, I've often said over the last few years, I don't go to camp much because at the weeks when my kids are there. Why? Because they'll have a lot more fun if Dad's not there. Because when Dad's there, 20 kids can be doing something, but I'm only going to notice one of them. And only one of them is going to get called down from me, the one that lives in my house. And so I just purposely stay away from camp and say, Brother Bob can get onto them. Brother Bob can handle it. But I know myself, I'm going to make camp no fun for them. So I'll just show up sometimes at some of the preaching services and sit back there in the back. And they get to just be normal kids like everybody else. And, as normal as they can get. And Brother Bob can handle all those other issues, or Brother David, whoever's out there at the time. But, a lot of times we are more critical and more vicious against our own people than we are even against the world. And social media has made that even worse. People will absolutely shred each other online publicly. Why? Because they get other people coming alongside saying, yeah, you tell them. Man, if I see a brother and sister in Christ doing something I don't think is right, I can get online and make a scathing comment, and inevitably there'll be other people coming along. I'm glad somebody finally said it. When that's not what the world needs to see us doing. They'll show no grace, no patience, no gentleness. They never make personal phone calls. They make public comments on their things online. Why? Because deep down, what we really want is to win. That's what we really want, to win. Galatians 5:15 says, but if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. Paul said if we keep devouring one another, everybody loses. A while back, locally, we had a church that had a split. And I happened to be in the building one night not long after it happened, and for a revival that they were having. And the pastor asked me to say something to the church just to try to encourage them. And that was really all I could say was, hey, I know this is a difficult time. And I know in the back of our mind, everybody, in any kind of split, everybody wants to win. But no one wins. The church that's here doesn't win. The church that left doesn't win. The city definitely doesn't win. When they need a unified gospel message in their town, but yet all that people think about in town when they hear that church's name is of the fighting that's going on. Nobody wins in that. When there's disruptions in families, nobody wins. Children lose, spouses lose, testimonies are destroyed in churches. Young Christians get disillusioned. And lost people look at that and says, if that's Christianity, I'll just stay home. I'll just stay home. Like, church should be our rest to worship one with another. We can worship God. Church shouldn't be our battlefield. Church shouldn't be our time to look side to side and critique everybody. It should be a time to look towards the Lord and worship Him. And man, I've been in churches that have that kind of tension there, and I'm so thankful to not have to go through that in our church, and to say, man, we're here to worship together, and while we are all very different individual people, we can come together and worship the Lord together without that, and that's something we should always guard. Now we get to some interesting verses here, verse 5 and 6, where it says, this famous Shibboleth passage. Verse 5, it says that the Gileadites capture the passages of Jordan. In verse 6, it said, they said unto him, say now Shibboleth, and he said Sibboleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. So he took him and slew him. 42,000 Ephraimites died because a guy couldn't say the word right. The inability of the Ephraimites to say Shibboleth correctly is due to a distinct regional dialect that lacked the SH sound. While the Gileadites used SH, they used the Hebrew letter Shin, the Ephraimites naturally pronounced it with the simple S. So they didn't say Shin, they said Sin. And for whatever reason in their dialect, they struggled with that. And so they just asked them, oh, who are you? And the guy's lined up, say Shibboleth. Kind of an interesting battle tactic. But he says Sibboleth. One pronunciation exposed who he was and who they were. Now, this is a literal event. This is just him saying one word wrong. It identified him. I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is a literal event. But also, spiritually, our speech does tell on us. It does tell who we are. Our speech reveals our heart. The Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And you can tell a lot about a person by listening to them talk. Now, they're listening going, I want to know where you're from. For us, we can tell a lot about a person, and maybe if we're trying to discern a situation right and wrong, sometimes all you got to do is let the person talk, and you can find out quick enough. Are there motives for the glory of God, or are there motives because of pride? Bitter speech reveals a bitter spirit. Critical speech reveals a critical heart. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I disagree with this person, and they say, they said this about this verse, and I don't think that's right, or if they say, they're just some stupid idiot hothead over here, and I think he's and they just start insulting them, that critical speech tells me this isn't about the glory of God. This is about them trying to insult the other person so they can win. Why? Because it's motivated by pride. Ephesians chapter 4 says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of thy mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying. Edifying means simply to build up. Some people are like professional demolishers. Every conversation is just meant to tear people down. Every issue becomes divisive. But here they asked him, they said, if you are who you say you are, say Shibboleth. And he reveals who he is, and 42,000 men died. 42,000 men. So then you add in, think about their wives, think about their children, think about their homes, all because the Ephraimites, in their pride, didn't humble themselves. That's the destructive power of fleshly conflict. James chapter 4 verse 1 says, from whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence even by your lust that war in your members? Every problem we see like this, remember, it's not simply an external problem. It's an internal problem. It's a heart problem. Our flesh wants recognition and revenge and control and validation. And if you are not a spirit-filled person, eventually the flesh starts winning. And not every battle, I heard somebody say, well, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Not every battle is worth fighting. Man, some of you have shared with me in the past some battles that you've had of others that are, saying things and doing things that are just seem to be hurtful. And it just seems like they're almost like goading you, like they want to give, it's like they want to fight the Lord, and if they can get you to do something that is wrong, then they can use that as an excuse not to serve the Lord. Some of you have shared those with me before. And it's really hard not to attend every one of those arguments that you're invited to. It's really, I've told people before, hey, somebody says something about you, just let it roll off your back. That's really easy when it's somebody else they're talking about, right? When they're talking about us, it's hard not to turn around and defend ourselves. But on the other hand, there are some people that have never missed an argument. They love conflict. They love to just, confront everything. They have to argue, they have to debate, they have to prove themselves right. But Romans chapter 12, verse 18 says, if it be possible, that's a key disclaimer there. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. That means sometimes there's just nothing you can do. Sometimes some people are just bent on causing problems. And probably, unfortunately, when I said that, most of you probably had somebody come to mind. Because we've all known people like that. That if they're not mad, they're not happy. Like they can't, like they have to have something to be mad about, or they feel like they don't have a purpose because they're not correcting anybody. They think God put them on this earth to fix everybody else. And so if they're not complaining, they're just not happy about anything. We've all known people like that. Just don't be that person. But he says, but as much as lieth in you, if at all possible, he says, live peaceably with all men. Now, what that doesn't mean is compromise truth in order to be at peace with people. And that's tough. We have to stand by truth. We can show a loving spirit, but we have to stand by truth. We stand for truth. We stand for doctrine. We stand for righteousness. But there's a huge difference between contending and just fighting because of pride. Judges chapter 12, then verse 7 through 15. We won't spend a lot of time on this. The last half of this chapter kind of moves rapidly through several judges. Jephthah dies, Ibzan judges, then Elon, then Abdon. Life moves quickly. People fight, feud, divide, and then suddenly their life is over. I heard Jerry Ross in a message that was on Facebook today. He said, how many of you in this room know, he said, I don't have to have you read, everybody knows their parents' name. He said, how many of you know all four of your grandparents' first and last name? And most people raise their hand. He said, now, how many of you know all of their parents' first and last name? And it was very few people. And he said, here's the sad reality. In 3 generations, most of your family won't even know your name. Life moves fast. We move on. Things happen quickly. One day, all the arguments will seem small. And it doesn't matter if they know our name. It'll matter, do they know Christ's name? That's why we stand for truth, because truth will endure. Righteousness will endure. Why do I spend so much of my time worrying about if I'm winning and if I'm the right one in this argument or whatever it may be, when all that's going to fade over time, when I could be using that time to point them to Christ? At the judgment seat of Christ, I don't think there's going to be an allotted time for everybody to brag about how many arguments they won. I also don't think there's going to be a lot of people that are going, you know what, I was lost, but man, this one guy, he came over and yelled at me really good, and he really set me straight, and I got saved that day. You know what we're going to care about at that point? Did we honor Christ? Did we love people? Did we forgive? Did we serve faithfully? Did we walk with God? Ephesians chapter 4 says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And, he says, don't just put that away. He says, and be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. That's Christianity, not win the fight, not prove everybody else wrong, not carry grudges for 10, 20, 30 years. Become like Christ. And what was he? Full of truth and grace. And ultimately, Judges chapter 12 shows us the failure of sinful humanity. Everyone in Judges chapter 12 is flawed. Everybody here, Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, Jephthah, they're all driven by flesh at some level. And honestly, that describes us too. Our biggest problems aren't relational, they're spiritual. Why? Sin has corrupted the human heart. And it separates us from God. But of course, we know the good news, and that is that Jesus Christ came and died for our sin. He came to reconcile sinners to God. Romans chapter 5, verse 8 says, but God commendeth his love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He took the wrath of our sin upon himself at the cross, and he died, and he was buried, and he rose again. And then that salvation is received by faith in Jesus Christ. Judges chapter 12 reminds us of what happens when man takes control. But if we would recognize that that happens because of sin, and that Jesus Christ died for that sin, then we can come to him and be saved. I want to give you a couple closing applications tonight of some practical lessons from Judges chapter 12. Number one, guard your spirit against offense. You're going to get hurt. We hear a lot today on social media about church hurt. It's called life hurt. Deal with people, you're going to get hurt. It's going to happen. But offense becomes dangerous when it turns us towards bitterness. Bitterness will rot at us. And it doesn't, the thing is, in our brain, we think our bitterness will show them, but our bitterness destroys us. It doesn't do a thing to them. Unfortunately, sometimes the people that hurt us, they moved on 10 seconds later. They even thought about it twice. They said what they wanted to say, and they've moved on. But we let it eat at us. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 says, looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Because he said, talking about that bitterness springing up. Bitterness doesn't seem to stay contained. So what I mean by that is a lot of times, let's use an example. I'll pick on John tonight. Let's say John gets upset at Brother Tim behind him, and he gets bitter at Tim. And he just, it starts to swell in him, and he gets bitter at Tim. What typically happens in these situations is it spreads to he's not just going to be bitter at Tim anymore. He's going to be bitter at those who seem to be friends with Tim. Well, why do they don't even confront him about this thing that he's done wrong. They haven't even said anything. Now they're bitter at 10 people. Brother Tim's only got 10 friends right now. I'm just kidding. Now Brother Tim's going to be bitter at me. No, I'm just kidding. But we start to spread that bitterness around. Well, if he's done something I'm offended at, and this person seems to be okay with him, a friend of my enemy is now my enemy. And we start to spread it that way. And we're just, all of a sudden, we just get mad at the world. It begins to spread. So guard your spirit against offense and bitterness. Secondly, refuse to let pride control you. Refuse to let pride control you. Now, humility is strength and pride destroys, but Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. So you say, well, how do I not let pride destroy? How do I know when that's coming in? Well, when you begin to have that offense towards a person, you know what you should double up on? Your prayer life for them. It is hard to be mad at God when you pray for him to bless your enemy. And I use the word enemy lightly here. But when you pray for him to bless somebody, and then when he blesses them, you can't get mad at God, right? You go, well, he's answering my prayers. But pray for them that despitefully use you. And so that's something that you could do to help guard your pride. Why? Because you know when that person is hard to pray for, that's the one you really need to pray for. And I don't mean like, I know there was a country song that came out a little while back, a woman saying she was going to pray for her ex, and she's like, I pray your brakes going down a hill, and all these things. Not that kind of prayer. We're not praying precatory psalms on people. We're praying for good for them. Number 3, use your words to heal, not destroy. Choose your words carefully. I believe the tongue can build a marriage or it can end one real quickly. The tongue can help strengthen a church or it can divide it very quickly. It can help your children or it can wound them. The Bible says death and life are in the power of the tongue in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Now, a little caveat on that. Use your words to heal, not destroy. But that doesn't mean you get to think all the bad things. Just don't say them out loud. We talked about this a few months ago. The old adage is if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all. If you don't have anything nice to say, then start working on your thought life. Because start thinking about the blessings. Don't just sit around and think evil but I didn't say it. I kept it all inside. No, we need to control our thought life. Number 4, remember who the real enemy is. The Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That brother in Christ is not your enemy. The devil is your enemy, and he's seeking whom he may devour. Now, it's frustrating to see people seem like they're fighting on his side in that battle. And it seems like they're doing his work. But remember, they're not the enemy. The devil is. The real enemy is Satan, the flesh, and sin. And the devil loves distracting Christians by getting us to turn on each other. Number 5, then, stay close to Christ. Again, another one of those things, real simple to say, right? Stay close to Christ. People who walk closely with Christ tend to be more like Christ. We tend to take on characteristics of the people that we spend the most time around. So as you draw close to Christ, you'll start to become more gracious. You'll start to become more patient. You'll start to become more forgiving. You'll start to become more loving. You'll become more tender-hearted. And the farther you drift from him, the less you'll be like that. And so do all you can to try to stay as close to Christ as you can. Chapter 12 here of Judges, I feel like I say this at the end of every chapter. Kind of a heartbreaking chapter, just to see what Israel's going through here. This chapter here, you got wounded pride turning into division, division turning into conflict, conflict turning into destruction. And the warning to us is pretty clear. Don't let flesh rule. Maybe somebody here tonight needs to forgive somebody. Maybe somebody here needs to apologize to somebody. Maybe somebody needs to stop holding that grudge or quit stirring division or simply needs to just get their eyes back on Christ. Maybe there's even somebody here, I know it's a Wednesday night, maybe there's even somebody here who needs to be saved. Because the only real answer for the human heart is Jesus Christ. And the gospel reconciles us vertically with God and then teaches us how to live horizontally with others. He says he's given us that it's all things that pertain to life and godliness. So I didn't just get saved so I could go to heaven one day. I got saved so I could glorify him in my life here with others. And without Christ, pride will rule. And without Christ, my flesh is going to win. And without Christ, division is going to spread. But when Christ changes our heart, he'll change how we speak. He'll change how we love. He'll change how we forgive. He'll change how we deal with problems in our life. And he'll change how we live. And so we must make sure we stay close to him. All right, we'll stop there and we'll pick up in Judges 13 next week. Judges 13 next week. And we'll go ahead and jump into our prayer request.